Chapter 228. The Fairy City of Guang'an Prefecture. In front of a palace where the Zhou family resides. Qin Daoxian bowed his hands to a red-haired cultivator in the purple house in front of him, and said with a smile, "Congratulations to Senior Zhang for his promotion heard." Zhang Yu smiled and said, "What a promotion, it's just taking over from senior brother's class, talking." Zhang Yu waved his hand, "Fellow Daoist Qin, don't call me from Senior Zhang and Senior Zhang. With your talent, it won't take long before you can catch up with my cultivation. You and I should be friends of the same generation." Qin Daoxian nodded eloquently, "Fellow Daoist Zhang, so, Ganyan Temple has now changed the residence of Cangzhou Xianqing to Guang'an Prefecture Xianqing?" "That's right." Zhang Yu looked at Qin Daoxian with deep eyes, and pointed out, "After the last time the Yunshao Palace competed for merit, the palace master ordered me to change the residence to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion. Speaking of which, you are the one who made great efforts, Qin Daoyu." "Nah. I heard this." Qin Daoxian waved his hands again and again, "I don't dare, I'm just a little shrimp in the vortex who can't help myself. He De Hineng can make this decision for the palace master of Qianyun Palace. It's good that you have this knowledge." Zhang Yu looked around, took 2 steps forward, and said in a very close tone, "Brother Qin, you and I are both Cangzhou cultivators. I would like to tell you a word of heart, brother, and I hope you don't mind." "Brother Zhang," but that's what he said. Zhang Yu pondered for a moment. The battle between the 2 factions of the Qianyuan sword sect has been going on for a long time. Young cultivators like me who have no basic strength, must not rashly intervene in it. Brother Qin, you have a bright future, and you should understand this truth. Looking at Zhang Ye's sincere eyes, Qin Daoxian nodded solemnly, "Thank you, Brother Zhang, for your suggestion." See, Qin Daoxian listened to this advice. Zhang Yu smiled gratified, and then his face returned to his businesslike appearance, and said, "I don't know if Daoyu Chen is looking for me this time because this time I came to Daoyu Zhang to exchange for a method of avatar." "The method of avatar?" Zhang Yu frowned. "With Daoyu Chen's current cultivation, what is the method of finding a clone?" After speaking, Zhang Yu immediately responded, "Of course, if it's inconvenient to say, I didn't ask Brother Quan Dang. Hear this." Qin Daoxian laughed and said, "There's nothing inconvenient, Brother Zhang should know, maybe it won't be long before we, Wan Xinghai, will recover Jinan Pass." Qin Daoxian said, his voice gradually disappeared. Zhang Yu is so shrewd. He was so hinted that he knew Qin Daoxian's plan instantly, and he whispered, "Brother Qin plans to send a clone to participate in the war." Qin Daoxian took his divine sense out of the jade slip, raised his head and said, "Brother Zhang, I choose to exchange this for Jia, heard." Zhang Yu took the jade slip and checked it out, with an unexpected expression on his face. The secret method of avatar in for Jia is a method of avatars of flesh and blood. Brother Qin chose this secret method of avatars, thinking that he was interested in Taizhou's secret treasure for cultivating avatars of flesh and blood. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was slightly taken aback. The secret treasure of cultivating flesh and blood clones? Why, Brother Qin, don't you know? Zhang Yu was also stunned, and immediately slapped his forehead, shook his head and laughed and said, "Don't blame Brother Qin, I did the exchange of merits in the Cloud Palace based on the cultivator's cultivation, and I forgot that Brother Qin still established the foundation." After he finished speaking, he handed over to beg for mercy again and again. See. Qin Daoxian only smiled bitterly. It seems that in Cangzhou cultivator's eyes, although Qin Daoxian is not a Zifu cultivator, he is better than a Zifu cultivator, and no one will treat him as a foundation-building cultivator. Brother Qin, let's see. With that said, Zhang Yu took out a jade slip again. Qin Daoxian took the jade slip and checked it again. Sure enough, the treasures recorded in this jade slip are much more diverse than the exchanged jade slip that Qin Daoxian obtained for the first time. Moreover, most of them are treasures that can only be used by cultivators of the Zifu. This is. When Qin Daoxian saw a treasure as bright as a blood diamond, his eyes narrowed. The secret treasure he saw was nothing else, it was the blood crystal he obtained in the real demon world. Chen Daoxian didn't think much, and asked casually, Brother Zhang said that the secret treasure for cultivating flesh and blood clones refers to this kind of treasure called blood crystal? Right. Zhang Yu nodded and said with a smile, blood crystals are a special product of Taizhou, which can not only cultivate flesh and blood clones, but also enhance the cultivation of cultivators. It's just that blood crystals are very precious. I heard that at the auction in Taizhou, a blood crystal can be sold for a sky-high price of more than 100,000 spirit stones, so few monks are prodigal to use it to refine their bodies. In addition, every time the blood crystal appears, it is quickly divided up by the monks in Taizhou. It is normal that you have never heard of this kind of treasure. Zhang Yu paused. If you want to cultivate a flesh and blood clone based on your own flesh and blood, you need at least 100 blood crystals, that is, 10 million spirit stones. Speaking of this, Zhang Yu shook his head, stunned for Chen Daoxuan's prodigal. Chapter 229. After getting the secret method of cultivating avatars in Forjia, Chen Daoxian said goodbye to Zhang Yu without further delay. Watching Chen Daoxian leave, there was a thoughtful look in Zhang Ye's eyes. Southwest waters of Wangxinghai. Shuanghu Island in Guang'an Prefecture. An escaping light crossed the sky and landed outside the mountain protection formation on Shuanghu Island. When the protective formation was turned on, Chen Daoxuan's figure was like a bubble melted into the water curtain, into the fourth-order protective formation. Back at Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian immediately expanded his consciousness. In a flash, he locked on the target. Shuanghu Island Chen Family Council Hall. Chen Daoyan only felt a headache these days. Since she was appointed by the young patriarch as the finance minister of the Chen family and took charge of the financial power of the family, the monks of the Taoist generation and the monks of the blessing generation in the clan came to her door one after another and asked her for funds from various departments, such as the Ministry of the Army, the Ministry of Education, and the Institute of Magical Instruments. Chen Daoyan naturally did not dare to delay, and the funds that should be given would not be less. However, some departments whose framework had just been set up also asked her for funds, which made Chen Daoyan very headache. In particular, the family's newly established Lingmai Management Department. The Spiritual Vessel Management Department, referred to as the Spiritual Management Department, is responsible for managing all the spiritual vessels within the Chen family's sphere of influence, including the use, maintenance, and promotion of the spiritual vessels, as well as the collection of the spiritual vessel tax. It can be said that this is a department with considerable power in the Chen family. Not to mention the use, maintenance and promotion of the spiritual veins, just collecting the spiritual vein tax gives the spiritual management department great power. Actually, the Lingmai tax of the spiritual management department of the Chen family was a name learned from Qianyuan Jianzong. As the ruler of Wangxinghai, Qianyuan Jianzong, in addition to its own direct jurisdiction, has adopted the method of spiritual vein tax for the fiefs of various states to tax the various immortal clans in Wangxinghai. The so-called spiritual pulse tax is to levy the tax burden according to the level of each spiritual pulse. Qianyuan Jianzong's spiritual vein tax is collected every 10 years, and the tax starts from the third-order spiritual vein. Based on the fact that the Chen family currently has 2 third-order spiritual veins. Each third-order spiritual vein needs to pay a spiritual vein tax of 100,000 spiritual stones to Qianyuan Jianzong every year. 10 years is the spiritual tax of 2 million spiritual stones. This tax burden is not too heavy. This is also the reason why the Yang family of Guang'an Prefecture clearly has the ability to cultivate fourth-order spiritual veins, but has not cultivated them. Because the spiritual vein tax of the fourth-order spiritual veins is as high as 1 million spirit stones every year, 10 years is 10 million spirit stones. 10 million spirit stones are enough to buy a Zifu Dan and add a Zifu cultivator to the family. The Yang family naturally did not want to waste it in vain. Only a big family with a profound background like the Zhou family can bear the tax burden of the fourth-order spiritual veins. The Lingmai tax levied by the Chen family's Lingguan department is mainly due to the difference in the objects levied compared with the Lingmai tax of Qianyuan Jianzong. Qianyuan Jianzong levied taxes on the immortal cultivators with spiritual veins, while the Chen family levied taxes on merchants and loose cultivators within their sphere of influence. In fact, every fairy city has such a tax department, such as the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. The Qin family's business of magic tools in Sangxiafang City has to pay taxes to the Zhou family. When the Yang family formed the Guang'an Immortal League, it was precisely because of this interest. In the entire Guang'an Prefecture, only the Xianqing family of Guang'an Prefecture was the only one, and the taxes paid by the scattered cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture and various families, except for the fixed spiritual pulse tax for the Qianyuan sword sect, all belonged to the Zhou family. This naturally made the other big clans headed by the Yang family dissatisfied. And now, the Qin family has also established Guanhai Xiancheng, so naturally they have to hold this part of the interests in their hands. Escape light descends. Qin Daoxuan's figure appeared in the side hall of the council hall. Lift your legs into the side hall. After several turns, Qin Daoxian found Qin Daoyan who was working at the desk. Beside Qin Daoyan, there are several young maids who are helping her sort out various accounts. Young Patriarch. When a maid saw Qin Daoxian, she was stunned for a moment, and then she saluted in surprise. Hearing the voice of the maid, Qin Daoyan, who was so busy, raised her head. When she saw Qin Daoxian, she quickly stood up and said in surprise, "Young Patriarch, are you back?" Qin Daoxian nodded with a smile, and then waved to the maid in the house. See. The maidservants bowed and slowly retreated. Qin Daoxian walked to the chair opposite Qin Daoyan and sat down, waved his hand and said, "What are you looking at me for? Sit down." Hearing this, Qin Daoyan smiled slyly and sat down gracefully. "Looking at your frowning face just now, why, the family's financial power is not easy to grasp, really. When the time is right, these immortal cities and their families will become the raw materials supply and commodity export places for my Qin family. At that time, you will know that the real terrifying plunder in this world is often bloodless." Chapter 230. Inside the family hall. Qin Daoyan looked at the young patriarch who was talking eloquently in front of him, her eyes full of admiration. Ah! Seeing Qin Daolian's increasingly confused but unaware eyes, Qin Daoxian closed his mouth decisively. "Cough, in short, you can let the spiritual management department do as I say." Qin Daoxian coughed dryly. "Yes, young patriarch." Qin Daoyan nodded happily. Immediately, she seemed to remember something and asked, "Do you have any other orders, young patriarch?" Qin Daoxian pondered for a while. "Daoyan, without affecting the development of the family, how many spiritual stones can the clan library take out now?" "This, let me do the math." Qin Daoyan didn't answer immediately, but looked down at the ledger on the desk. "Half an hour." Qin Daoyan raised her head and said, "Young patriarch, without affecting the development of the family, my Qin family can draw out 340 million spiritual stones at most." Hearing this amazing number, Qin Daoxian just nodded slightly, and did not show too surprised expression. Regarding the family's financial situation, although Qin Daoxian didn't know the specific figures, he still had a general idea. Hundreds of millions of spirit stones were naturally a fantastic number for the former Qin family, but for today's Qin family, it is less than the annual output value of the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. Especially after the establishment of the Tsangzhou Business Alliance, the commerce and trade of the entire Tsangzhou are unprecedentedly prosperous. Thanks to the superb productivity of the magic tool factory and the medicinal herb factory, the magic tools and medicinal herbs of the Qin family on Shuanghu Island are now well known throughout Tsangzhou. Countless family cultivators and Tsangzhou loose cultivators all wanted to request the purchase of goods from the Qin family on Shuanghu Island. Because compared with other families' elixirs, the Qin family's elixirs are inexpensive. As long as you're not stupid, you know how to choose. If it weren't for the limited production capacity of the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone, the Qin family might have occupied the entire Zhengzhou market for magical medicines. Even if the production capacity is insufficient. The Qin family on Shuanghu Island is also the largest supplier of low-level magic tools and low-level medicinal pills in Zhengzhou, firmly occupying the market for low-level magic tools and low-grade medicinal pills. 340 million spirit stones. Qin Daoxian pondered for a moment. So, the production of magical instruments and medicinal herbs in the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone has now risen to a new level? Yes, young patriarch. Talking about the core interests of the family, Qin Daolian's tone became slightly excited. Since last year, the annual output value of the family magic weapon factory has reached 250 million, and the annual output value of the medicinal herb factory has exceeded 300 million spirit stones. The magic weapon factory has expanded from one large factory to 3 large factories now, and the pharmaceutical factory also has 2 large factories. If it weren't for the lack of family cultivators, we could have doubled our production capacity 10-fold or even more than 100-fold. Now, the family's annual profit from Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone is as high as more than 200 million spirit stones. When it comes to Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone, every member of the Qin clan will be sincerely proud. The Qin family started from small flying sword workshops and grew step by step, and now has 3 large magic weapon factories. The magic weapon factory on Shuanghu Island is no longer just the production of flying swords. The Qin family's magic weapon factory has long since started producing various magic tools, including flying swords. Even the precious defensive magic weapon such as spirit armor, the magic weapon factory of the Qin family is preparing the production line and starting to enter the mass production stage. It can be said. In the exploration of industrializing the production of various instruments, Qin Daoxian is just a pioneer, and the monks who gradually grow up are the ones who really carry them forward. This is also the result that Qin Daoxian wants to see. The road of industrialization cannot rely on only one person, even if this person has vision and cognition far beyond the world. Only the group can truly realize industrialization. In this world. This group is the Shuxian family power with the Qin family as the core. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's expression, Qin Daolian thought that there were not enough spirit stones, and hurriedly said, "If the young patriarch thinks it is not enough, I can ask Brother Daochuan to urgently borrow a spirit stone." Speaking of this, Qin Daolian covered her mouth and laughed lightly. "Everyone in the clan says I'm a little rich woman. How do they know that the place where my Qin family is really rich is the treasury in the hands of Brother Daochuan?" Hear this. Qin Daoxian also laughed. After these years of operation, Lingshi coin has become a new currency in circulation not only in Guanhai Xiancheng, but also in the entire Qin family's sphere of influence. The success of Lingshi coin depends on the consistent reputation of the Chongping Central Bank. This kind of credit was accumulated little by little in exchange with the Guanhai Xiancheng family cultivator and the loose cultivator who never owed money. In today's Guanhai Xiancheng, no monk would doubt the credibility of the spirit stone coins. This is the biggest gain of Qin Daoxuan's issuance of Lingshi coins so far. Even in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, some monks began to use this new type of currency. After all, loose cultivators are mobile, and with their migration, the scope of use of spirit stone coins is also spreading out a little bit. This kind of diffusion is silent, but it works better than any hype, because this kind of diffusion is completely spontaneous behavior among loose cultivators. Unlike when Qin Jiagang implemented Lingshi coins in Guanhai Xiancheng, he had to rely on the strong pressure of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. The reason why Lingshi coins cannot be used in the entire Guang'an Prefecture now is because of the inconvenience of exchange. For example, a loose cultivator wants to use spirit stone coins in the immortal city of Guang'an, but the vast majority of monks in the immortal city of Guang'an do not agree with this currency. Unless the object of the transaction with him is also from Guanhai Xiancheng. If the Qin family could establish a branch in Xiancheng, Guang'an Prefecture, to exchange spirit stones, the result would be very different. Driven by the scattered cultivators of Guanhai Xiancheng, maybe the spirit stone coins can really be circulated in the Xiancheng of Guang'an Prefecture. Of course. The premise is that the Zhou family, who is the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, does not stop it. If the Zhou family does not allow this currency to be circulated in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, the Qin family has nothing to do. But the better news is that perhaps the usage rate of spirit stone coins in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture is not high, and the Zhou family is not aware of the threat of spirit stone coins for the time being. Even among the monks in the Zhou family, there are many monks who use the new currency of spirit stone coins. Inside the hall. After listening to Chen Daolian's suggestion, Chen Daoxian shook his head. Forget it, 340 million spirit stones are more than enough, and the central bank's silver treasury is temporarily moved. Yes. Chen Daolian hesitated, then nodded obediently. Seeing her appearance, Chen Daoxian still didn't know what she was thinking, and said with a smile, "Why, do you think it's a waste to keep such a large sum of spirit stones sealed in the silver vault? It feels a bit wasteful." Actually, you are right. It is indeed a huge waste to put so many spiritual stones in the silver treasury as a reserve. Chen Daoxian nodded in agreement, and then said, "However, this kind of waste is necessary." He turned to ask, "Daolian, why do you think I will promote the new currency of Lingshi coin?" "Young Patriarch, you said that it is to have enough trading currency to pave the way for the future expansion of the family's industrial production capacity." "You're only right a little bit." Chen Daoxian paused. He grabbed a bunch of melon seeds from the fruit plate on the table, and spread them out on the table at will. He pointed to the pile of melon seeds on the table and said, "Look, the pile of melon seeds on the table is like the total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture." With that said, Chen Daoxian drew out a small part from the pile of melon seeds, and continued, "This small pile is the total amount of spirit stones that my Qin family owns. So now, every time we issue a spirit stone coin, it is equivalent to confiscating one spirit stone circulating on the market in Guang'an Prefecture. With the productivity of my Qinjia industrial zone, what do you think will happen in the end?" Chen Daolian frowned. After thinking for a moment, she raised her head and said, "Will there be fewer and fewer spirit stones in circulation in Guang'an Prefecture?" "Bingo." Chen Daoxian nodded in relief. "There will be fewer and fewer spirit stones in circulation in Guang'an Prefecture, and more spirit stone coins in circulation. This will not be transferred by people's will. Because the productivity of my Qinjia Shuanghu Island industrial zone is far greater than that of other outsiders. The family's productivity is more advanced. By the end." Chen Daoxian abruptly swiped the seeds on the table. "When all these spirit stones are earned by my Qin family, only the spirit stone coins issued by the Changping Central Bank will be in circulation in the market. At that time, in Guang'an Prefecture, spirit stone coins will be the only currency in circulation. But, the total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture is not static, especially now that the Zhangzhou Business Alliance is established, and the trade between our Guang'an Prefecture and foreign governments is becoming more and more frequent. Isn't that a good thing?" Chen Daoxian looked at Chen Daolian with a faint smile on his face. "How is this?" Chen Daolian said, and suddenly woke up. After all, Zhangzhou is not a bigger Guang'an mansion. The total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture is limited. Even if the amount of spirit stones in Zhangzhou is 10 or 100 times that of Guang'an Prefecture, there is also a limit. In this way, the Qin family can still use the advanced productive forces of industrialization to hollow out the spiritual stones of Zhangzhou little by little. As for the speed of hollowing out the spirit stone, it completely depends on the process of industrialization of the Qin family. With the current productivity of the Shuanghu Island industrial zone, if you want to hollow out all the spiritual stones in Zhangzhou, even hundreds of years of time for the Qin family are not enough. But what if Guanhai Xiancheng becomes an industrial fairy city in the future? Chen Daolian immediately thought of the plan of the young patriarch to recruit loose cultivators. Isn't this preparation for human resources for the future industrialization of Guanhai Xiancheng? This moment, Chen Daolian was completely convinced. She felt that everything in Sangzhou, whether it was a family cultivator or a loose cultivator, were just pieces on the chessboard, while Chen Daoxian was the flag-bearer hiding behind the chessboard. If it wasn't for the young patriarch telling her all this, she would never have realized that the young patriarch's plan was so far-reaching. But when you think about it, it all came naturally. The only variable is strength. Chen Daoxian seemed to see through Chen Daolian's thoughts and said, if you want to accomplish all this, strength is the prerequisite, otherwise, others will have the ability to lift the table at any time. Chen Daolian nodded in agreement. The rules of this world, in the final analysis, are no different from the previous life, and even more naked. In Wanxinghai, everyone was suppressed by the Qianyuan sword sect above their heads, and everyone was a little more disciplined. If it is in Xianyun continent, it is not uncommon for monks to destroy their families because of competition for resources. But how to follow the rules? Once the Chen family touches the core interests of others, other families will definitely resist. Even the Zhou family, who is as good as the Chen family, now wears a pair of trousers, no exception. In this regard, as the helm of the Chen family on Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian is very sober. His personal friendship with Zhou Mubai belongs to personal friendship, and the family's interests belong to the family's interests, which should not be confused. 340 million spirit stones is a huge sum of money. Even if the Chen family wanted to draw such a large sum of spirit stones, it was not something that could be done at the click of a button. Moreover, even Chen Daoxuan's high-end storage bag could not hold so many spiritual stones. Without any choice, Chen Daoxian had to order the family to buy more high-end storage bags to hold the spirit stones. This trip to Taizhou, Chen Daoxian intends to go alone. After all, in the family, he has the highest cultivation base and the fastest evasion speed. The other monks followed him, but instead slowed him down. Say it again. Chen Daoxuan's trip was just to buy blood crystals, and there was absolutely no need to bring family monks. 3 full days. Chen Daolian prepared all the spirit stones properly. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxuan's Lingfu courtyard, Chen Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, suddenly opened his eyes, his face full of surprise, and said, "At last I have saved 30 stardust." Say it. He sank his consciousness into the sea of consciousness. Within the sea of consciousness, 30 stardust revolved continuously around the golden scriptures. Compared with the spectacular scene of more than 700 stardust a few days ago, the 30 stardust above the sea of consciousness is somewhat isolated. Below the stardust, it is the sea of divine light with a radius of nearly 10 miles. After several months of cultivation, the sea of divine light expanded from a diameter of 100 feet to a diameter of 10 miles. Compared with the time when I first cultivated, the area has been enlarged by many times. But compared with the 100-mile diameter of the Sea of Consciousness, it is still a long way off. Chen Daoxian estimated that it would take at least a year for the Sea of Light to reach the limit of the Sea of Consciousness. Actually, this speed is already quite fast. At that time, in order to cultivate the soul-determining divine light, Shinjue Jinren burned, looted the elixir to restore divine consciousness in Sangzhou, Jingzhou, and Taizhou. Even so, it took Shinjue Jinren several years to expand the Sea of Divine Light to a range of hundreds of miles. To sum up, Chen Daoxuan's cultivation speed is several times faster than that of Shinjue a real person, and from beginning to end, Chen Daoxian does not need to use any spiritual medicine to restore consciousness. He just needs to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic silently once every time when his consciousness is exhausted. Know the sea. Apart from 30 stardust and golden scriptures, there are only clumps of light left. These light groups were all learned by Chen Daoxian and the 2 generations. Among them, the things that he has learned in this life are the most complicated, including exercises, spells, sword tactics, inheritance of utensils, inheritance of alchemy, inheritance of talismans, and so on. In these light clusters, there are 36 new light groups, and these 36 light groups are faintly surrounded together, forming a huge sphere, which is particularly conspicuous in Chendeoxuan's Sea of Consciousness. These 36 light clusters are exactly the 36 first-order space sword tactics that Chen Daoxian learned in the Wangxinghai underwater world. Look at the 36 space sword tactics in the Sea of Knowledge. Chen Daoxian slammed the 30 stardust together without hesitation, and the next moment, Chen Daoxian entered the epiphany again. Chapter 231. As the 30 stardust in the Sea of Consciousness merged into one, countless fragmentary perceptions about space-type sword intent flooded into my heart. Rapid, instant shadow, wave. Various spatial perceptions are constantly emerging in the Sea of Consciousness. Chen Daoxian is like a hungry traveler in the desert, greedily absorbing these fragmentary perceptions and piecing them together little by little. Soon, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension of space sword intent is getting deeper and deeper, and he is only one step away from stepping into the first level of space sword intent. But obviously the complete spatial sword intent is not so easy to comprehend. At the moment when Chen Daoxuan's success was on the verge of failure, 36 light clusters in the Sea of Knowledge burst out with bright rays of light. Next second, 36 light clusters shattered collectively, turned into torrents of light, and slowly merged together. At this time, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension of space sword intent suddenly went up a level. As more and more insights about the spatial sword intent came to his mind, Chen Daoxian unswervingly stepped towards the threshold of the spatial sword intent. Boom! Know the sea. 36 light clusters were completely merged into one. In the Sea of Dantian Qi, an invisible wave spread out in the whole Sea of Dantian Qi. Chen Daoxian, who had comprehended the Siyu sword intent once, understood that this was his performance after comprehending the sword intent. Success! Chen Daoxian suddenly opened his eyes with ecstasy in his eyes. He didn't expect that he had been working so hard for so long before he realized the branch of the sword intent of Water Xing, the sword intent of Siyu. However, this time, it took him less than a month before and after to fully understand the spatial sword intent. The difference is so huge that it is hard to put into words. Chen Daoxian knew that it wasn't his kendo talent that made rapid progress. The reason why he made such great progress was entirely due to the help of the stardust of perception that he breathed out after the golden scriptures absorbed the qi of chaos and the unknown inheritance trial in the underwater world of Wangxinghai. Which of the two is missing? Chen Daoxian didn't even think about comprehending the space sword intent in such a short period of time. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's heart was filled with joy. Perhaps, the real demon world is my chance to truly rise. Chen Daoxian felt the intangible and intangible space sword intent of the Sea of Qi, and said excitedly. No matter what kind of sword intent, the first layer of sword intent is invisible. The division of sword intent has nothing to do with the type. But power is related to the type of sword intent. The third-order mid-grade Qingying sword is full of spirituality. As soon as he flew out of the Sea of Qi in Dantian, he happily danced around Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian caressed the Qingying sword lightly, his face full of joy, and said, "Let's use you to try my new understanding of the space sword intent." The words fall. Chen Jingjian let out a light cry, as if responding to Chen Daoxian. With the injection of real yuan, the Qingying sword suddenly erupted with a sword glow that was about 3 feet long. Of course, this is just the result of Chen Daoxuan's intentional control of his true essence in order to test the spatial sword intent. Otherwise, go all out. Qingying sword can now burst into a sword beam that is about 100 meters long, which is not inferior to Zhou Mubai back then. Although the sword light of the Qingying sword is only 3 feet, you will find it if you look closely. In addition to the sword glow of Qingying sword, there is a layer of invisible fluctuations, and under this layer of fluctuations, the space is distorted by Chen Daoxuan's flying sword. Space sword intent is really powerful. The ordinary flying sword, let alone 100 feet, even if it is hundreds of thousands of meters, it is impossible to change the space, but after comprehending the space sword intent, it is so easy to distort the space. Chen Daoxian muttered when he saw the scene in front of him. But obviously, this is not all the power of space sword intent. I saw Chen Daoxuan's consciousness move, and Fei Jian slashed towards the rockery group in the courtyard. However, before Fei Jian flew to the rockery group, he suddenly disappeared in place. The next moment, Fei Jian suddenly appeared in front of the rockery group, directly penetrating the mountain. Now, if there are monks with a cultivation level above Jin Dan who are present and observe carefully, they will find out. During the process of the flying sword running through the mountain, the sword glow and the sword body did not have the slightest contact with the rockery. Instead, relying on the spatial fluctuations outside the Jianmong, the space where the rockery is located is torn apart, thereby penetrating the mountain. Chen Daoxian did not know where is the power limit of this kind of space attack, but he knows that it is definitely much stronger than Siyu Jianyi's sword transformation Starlight. As for how strong, Chen Daoxian was also a little uncertain at this moment. Because there is really no suitable opponent to let him cut a sword. 3 days later, Chen Daoxian took the 7 high-end storage bags handed by Chen Daoyan. Hanging 7 high-end storage bags around his waist, Chen Daoxuan's face was full of embarrassment. Because he looks kind of funny now. In these 7 high-end storage bags, each storage bag is filled with nearly 50 million spirit stones, and the storage bags are filled to the brim. Thanks to the opening of trade between Guang'an Prefecture and Bishu Prefecture. Chapter 232. Chen Daoxian looked at the young cultivator who only established the foundation, his mind moved slightly, and he cupped his hands and said, "Exactly. Great." The young cultivator said politely again, "I don't know if I can invite fellow Taoists to board the boat for a chat." So, disturbed. The words fall. The two of them joined the spirit boat together. The spirit boat was extravagant and extravagant. In addition to a group of foundation-building cultivators who were responsible for guarding it, there were more than a dozen beautiful maids waiting on it. Chen Daoxian entered the cabin of the spirit ship, as if he was in the village of his daughter, which made him frown. The young cultivator seemed to see Chen Daoxuan's discomfort, waved his hand at the maid at random, and said with a smile, "This is a hobby, which will make friends laugh." Chen Daoxian nodded slightly and did not speak. "Wait until the maid will serve the spirit tea." The young monk smiled and said, "Introduce myself. I am Ji Yanzhao from the Ji family in Jingzhou. I don't know if your friend is from Cangzhou." Cangzhou Chen family cultivator, Chen Daoxian, heard. Ji Yanzhao pondered for a moment, and seemed to have never heard the name of the Chen family in Cangzhou. Or, there are no famous families in Cangzhou at all. As for the Zifu family, they can still mix in Cangzhou, but in other states, it's not enough to watch. Among the Wangxinghai states, with the exception of Cangzhou, the families below the Golden Core are not considered to be the cultivators at all. At this point, Cangzhou cultivator is also clear in his heart. After experiencing 2 major disasters in succession, the rebellion of gods and the battle of Zenangwan, Cangzhou has too many high-level monks and potential monks, and they have been exhausted. So much so that Cangzhou cultivators were despised by cultivators from other Wangxinghai states. Despite his contempt in his heart, Ji Yanzhao didn't show any contempt on his face. Instead, he said sincerely, "It turns out that he is a fellow Taoist from the Chen family, so polite." Ji Daoyu is polite. Chen Daoxian picked up the spirit tea on the table, took a sip, and then asked, "I don't know if Ji Daoyu invited you, why?" "Oh," Ji Yanzhao put down the spirit tea in his hand and said with a smile, "Naturally, it is to participate in the sermons of Yuanchen Jinjuan with fellow Taoists." To be honest, the sermons of Yuanchen Taoist are open to the monks of Yuanchen Xianqing free of charge. If the monks from other states want to participate, they must pay. Among them, the Tsangzhou monks who are closest to Yuanqin Xianqing paid the least. So, fellow Taoist Ji wants to go with me and pretend to be a Tsangzhou cultivator. Qin Daoxian had a faint smile on his face. Cough cough, a look of embarrassment flashed across Ji Yanzhe's handsome face, and he said, I attended the sermon of true monarch Yuanqin with my friends from Tsangzhou, how can it be considered an impersonation? Qin Daoxian thought for a moment, then nodded and said, okay, I can promise you. Friend Daoist is really refreshing. When I saw Daoist friend's face, I knew that friend was Jigong. Qin Daoxian waved his hands again and again, interrupted his flattery, and said, it's just that this can't be done in vain. Ah. Ji Yanzhao stopped immediately, smiled awkwardly, and cupped his hands, I don't know what your friend wants. Your request is very simple, can you tell me about Jinjuan Yuanqin's sermon in detail? Hear this request. Ji Yanzhao breathed a sigh of relief, then smiled and said, it turns out that this is the first time you have participated in Jinjuan Yuanqin's sermon. Qin Daoxian nodded calmly. The date of Yuanqin Zhenjin's sermon is not fixed. Except for the monks who have lived in Yuanqin Xianqing for a long time, few outsiders know the date of the other's sermon immediately. But every 10 years, Jinjuan Yuanqin would preach for 3 days. This is the only fixed preaching time for Yuanqin Jinjuan. But this sermon is obviously not a fixed sermon time. The cultivator of the Ji family in Jingzhou in front of him must have his own information channel in Yuanqin Xianqing. From this point, we can see the difference between the old big family and the new family like the Qin family. In addition to personal connections, in terms of information acquisition, the Qin family has very little information from the outside world except for the 1/3 of their own land. Not to mention Taizhou and Jingzhou. Even in Tsangzhou, if it wasn't for the establishment of the Tsangzhou Business Alliance, Qin Daolin gradually established his own intelligence channels in various provinces, and the Qin family was in a state of smearing Tsangzhou. Of course, the current Qin family has no time to take care of other states outside Tsangzhou. If it wasn't for the need to buy blood crystals this time, he would not have gone to Taizhou at all. Qin Daoxian is not short of cultivation resources, so there is no need to go to other people's sites to mess around. This is basically the consensus of the various immortal clans. Unless they were immortal cultivators with similar relationships, they would not easily send high-level cultivators to each other's territory to avoid misunderstandings. After all, the cultivator's might is attributed to himself. A high-level cultivator wandering around on other people's territory can easily arouse the hostility of others. Time passed little by little in Ji Yanzhe's introduction. In less than a few hours, Yuanqin Xianqing was faintly in sight. As Yuanqin Immortal City is approaching, Qin Daoxian found that the number of escaping lights and immortal boats in the sky suddenly increased sharply. Seeing that no one around heard the conversation between the two, Ji Yanzhao breathed a sigh of relief, and he whispered, Brother Qin doesn't know, the spirit boat I use is borrowed from the family, not mine. But the 260,000 spirit stones that I heard, I paid for myself, so naturally the two should not be confused. Hearing this explanation, Qin Daoxian nodded in understanding. It seems that this is the normal appearance of a family member. Perhaps the Qin family on Shuanghu Island is not as strong as the Ji family, but he is the helm of the Qin family, and the resources he can mobilize are naturally not comparable to a foundation-building cultivator of the Ji family. Actually, as a foundation-building cultivator of the Ji family, Ji Yanzhao was able to use more than 200,000 spiritual stones to listen to the sermon, and he could already see the profound heritage of the Ji family. If it is replaced by the Qin family, can any foundation-building cultivator use 200,000 spirit stones? There is no problem. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian looked a little embarrassed again. Ji Yanzhao didn't know what Qin Daoxian was thinking. Seeing his embarrassed expression, he thought he had reacted, and felt ashamed for his shameless words just now. As a family member who has received an elite education, Ji Yanzhao is naturally not reckless in his life. He understands the principle of accepting it as soon as possible. He quickly changed the subject and said, Brother Chen, look, that is our position. Ji Yanzhao pointed to a Wenyu futon not far away. Yuanchen Jinjuan preached on a high platform on the floating immortal island. The platform is now empty. Around the high platform, there are circles of futons made by Wenyu. These futons are the seats for monks to listen to. Among them, the seats closest to the high platform are not sold to the outside world, but are given away. The further the rest of the seats are, the more the price goes down. Look around. The huge floating immortal island is all this kind of warm jade futon. One can imagine how spectacular the scene will be when Yuanchen Jinjuan starts to preach. Seeing that most of these were empty Wenyu futons, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but stunned. Brother Ji, do you know when the sermon will start? It should be 7 days later. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian nodded and walked towards his position silently. The 26 seats Ji Yanzhao purchased were all first-class seats. Class A seats are the best group of seats except for non-external sales, with a total of 10,000 seats. Chen Daoxian and others had better luck and just bought it. Seeing these seats on floating immortal island, Chen Daoxian vaguely knew why Yuanchen Immortal City was able to develop. Compared with other nascent soul true monarchs, the deepest impression of this true monarch Yuanchen on him is that he doesn't hold it up, which, as the saying goes, is down to earth. Chen Daoxian had seen so many infant true monarchs in Qianyuan Jianzong, and they even looked at the Zifu monks in Sangzhou with indifference, let alone these foundation-building and even chi-refining monks on the immortal island now. Normally, the cultivators in the chi-refining stage were not even qualified to meet the Yuanying cultivators, but Yuanchen Jinjuan broke this unspoken rule, not only willing to meet the low-level cultivators, but even preaching for them in person. As such, how can a low-level monk not be grateful to Dade? How can Yuanchen Xianqing not be prosperous? Floating Fairy Island. After Chen Daoxian and his party sat down, more and more monks flew to the immortal island. The originally vacant Wenyu futon gradually became packed. Although the immortal island is full of monks, it is boundless at a glance, at least tens of millions. But the audience was silent, and no one was making a noise. Even the cultivators even changed their breathing to internal breathing. In the blink of an eye, 7 days have passed. As the time for Jinjuan Yuanchen's sermons got closer and closer, more than a dozen figures flew over the immortal island, and flew straight towards the first-class seats. Chen Daoxian realized that they were flying towards Ji Yanzhao and the others when the other party lowered the escape light. This group of people is led by a cultivator in the early period of Zifu. Although his face is handsome, his indifferent expression can easily make outsiders feel disgusted with him. It was not his appearance that attracted Chen Daoxian's attention, but his forehead, which actually had a divine pattern exactly the same as Yi Wadeo's. The tester of Wan Xinghai inheritance was thinking. Clap. A storage bag was thrown over by a servant beside him. Surprisingly, the servant was actually a late-stage cultivator of the Purple Mansion. Here is 1 million spirit stones, I will buy you 13 seats. It was the first time that Ji Yanzhao had been smashed with spirit stones like this since he was a child, but he could see that the cultivators in front of him were not only powerful but also had complex backgrounds. In addition, he was away from home and didn't want to cause trouble, so he picked up the spiritual stone on the ground and flipped it upside down, then turned around and said, Xiao Lan, give your seats to the seniors. Yes. The foundation building maid named Xiao Lan turned pale and nodded immediately. The rest of the maids did not dare to resist, and stood up one by one with a lonely look. Soon, 12 seats were vacated, and the last one remained. Seeing this, Ji Yanzhao said with an ugly face, Senior, I am a disciple of the Ji family in Jingzhou, and these are my Ji family cultivators. The Ji family. The leading young cultivator nodded, then looked at Chen Daoxian, and said in a commanding tone, You, get out of the way. True monarch Yuanchen asked 3 questions in a row. Immediately, everyone's hearts were attracted. Since Qin Daoxian stepped into the fairyland under the guidance of Qin Xianhe, although he occasionally had similar doubts during his practice, he never got the answer. All along, he has been ignorant. When others cultivate qi, he also cultivates qi, and when others build foundations, he also builds foundations. Qin Daoxian didn't actually understand the essence of cultivation. In other words, most of the loose cultivators don't know much about it. Although Qin Daoxian is not a loose cultivator, in addition to inheriting resources, he is not much different from a loose cultivator in terms of cognition of the way of cultivation, and is still very lacking. To some extent. The three questions raised by Xinju and Yuanchen are more like questions about the nature of cultivation. Seeing that everyone was attracted, Xinju and Yuanchen said slowly, "You must have seen such a sentence from the various exercises of practice on the first day of stepping into the immortal path. The way of practice is nothing more than self-cultivation inside and outside combined avenue. So, what is the self and what is the Tao? In my humble opinion, the cultivation of one's own body lies in the three jewels, essence, qi, and spirit." True monarch Yuanchen paused. In simple terms, refining the physical body is a strong essence, refining the spiritual energy is nourishing the energy, and strengthening the spiritual consciousness is the concentration. Refinement of qi, refinement of spirit. Under the sermon of Xinju and Yuanchen, one's own practice can be divided into three aspects: spirit, energy, and spirit, but these three aspects do not exist independently, but are interdependent. Such is the way of refining qi, it can temper the body and strengthen the consciousness. The way of refining the body can also nourish the qi and concentrate the mind. Although Xinju and Yuanchen did not talk about the way of practicing spiritual consciousness, Qin Daoxian knew that there was such a way of practice in the world. The Sea of Divine Light is a typical spiritual practice method. Soul conditioning divine light is nothing more than a magical power attached to the method of divine consciousness cultivation, the Sea of Divine Light. On the high platform, Yuanchen Jinjuan was still preaching without stopping, and everyone was fascinated by it. Following his sermon, the floating immortal island actually began to have a vision. In the void, the illusory golden lotus blossoms gradually bloom. But at this moment, everyone has no intention to pay attention to the vision, and everyone's mind is attracted by true monarch Yuanchen. At the beginning, the cultivators in the outermost qi refining period could still understand what true monarch Yuanchen said, but the more they went on, the more illusory they felt, and they didn't know what to say. In desperation, these qi refining cultivators had to force themselves to remember, but the strange thing was that no matter how hard they forced themselves, they just couldn't remember, and it was amazing. What's even more strange is that, as the words of true monarch Yuanchen became more and more profound, although these qi refining cultivators couldn't understand them, they felt sick in their hearts and fainted. The experienced qi refining cultivator did not dare to listen anymore, so he immediately got up from the Wenyu futon, bowed his hands to Xinju and Yuanchen, and flew away. The qi refining cultivator who came to listen to the Tao for the first time saw this, and quickly followed suit and left with the large army in embarrassment. Less than half a day. The monks who listened to the sermon on the floating immortal island decreased by 90%. Only the monks above the foundation establishment period were still mesmerized. On the high platform, true monarch Yuanchen continued with a smile, "So, cultivation and realm cannot be confused. Cultivation is to measure the degree of self-cultivation, and realm is to comprehend the depth of the Tao. Although the two cannot be confused, they are mutually dependent." Heard here. Qin Daoxian suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. Speaking of which, he is a typical monk with low cultivation and high realm. In terms of cultivation, Qin Daoxian only has 3 levels of foundation building, but in terms of the realm of swordsmanship, he has comprehended 2 kinds of sword intent in a row, one of which is space sword intent, and the other is closer to the realm of triple star transformation. When an ordinary cultivator is building a foundation, let alone the realm of the 3rd level of sword intent, it is already a posture of heaven to comprehend a sword intent to the invisible realm. This shows how terrifying Chen Daoxuan's realm is among fellow cultivators who are cultivators. The Tao is ethereal and invisible, so the monks have to seek the things that inherit the Tao in order to understand the Tao. At this point, the cultivation world has a distinction between the way of magic and the way of swordsmanship. Inheriting Tao in art, hence the name Dao Shu, inheriting Tao in sword, hence the name Kendo, because the paths are different, but the same destination. Therefore, there is no need to envy the sword cultivator who chooses to follow the martial arts. Although the sword cultivator is powerful at the same level, it has the disadvantage of being easily broken. Although the martial arts monk is slightly weaker, but for a while, Jinjuan Yuanchen was actually stuck. He didn't seem to think of words to comfort the fellow practitioners, so he smiled slightly, skipped this topic, and continued to explain the avenue. The Tao that Jinjuan Yuanchen realized was similar to Qin Dao Xian, and it was also the way of water. However, Jinjuan Yuanchen is not a sword cultivator, but a martial arts cultivator. During this trip to Taizhou, the immortal city he was going to was the immortal city controlled by the Jiang family of Taizhou Yuanying family, the immortal city of Yongye. Compared with the scattered sand in Sangzhou, the entire Taizhou is basically under the control of the Jiang family. As for other large and small families in Taizhou, they all depend on the Jiang family to survive and are affiliated families of the Jiang family. To some extent. In Taizhou, the Jiang family's words are even better than Qianyuan Jianzong's words. Of course, this is just what the Taizhou monks said in private. On the bright side, no family dared to disobey the order of Qianyuan Jianzong. After all, now that the Qianyuan sword sect is at its peak in the spring and autumn, who is tired of living and dares to find it unhappy? Compared with Zhangzhou, Taizhou's territory is much wider. From the map, the territory of Taizhou is more than 5 times that of Zhangzhou. Therefore, after Chen Daoxian entered the territory of Taizhou, he flew for 9 days before arriving at the immortal city of Yongye in the middle of Taizhou. Starting from Shuanghu Island, if you don't count the time he spent participating in true monarch Yuanchen's sermons. It took Chen Daoxian about half a month to arrive at the eternal night fairy city of the Jiang family in Taizhou. Although Taizhou and Sangzhou are 2 neighboring states. However, compared to Zhangzhou, Taizhou was significantly less affected by the Xinjue rebellion. In Chen Daoxuan's view, it may be related to the fact that the immortal mansion is in Sangzhou. Because the distance of Mi Chen Fan's space teleportation is only 100,000 miles at most, and it can't even go out of Zhangzhou. If the real person of Xinjue went to the Taizhou territory and was intercepted, he would not be able to escape back to Xinjue Immortal Mansion immediately. Although Mi Chen Fan has the function of instant transmission. But in an era when everyone hated him to the core, how could Xinjue Jinren dare to escape in Taizhou alone, and a few high-level cultivators would block him, or he would die. With God's prudence, he was naturally reluctant to take such a risk. Therefore, compared with Zhangzhou Xiaoxianji, Taizhou Xiaoxianji is much more prosperous as a whole. This prosperity is manifested in many ways. For example, in terms of the number of ordinary monks and high-level monks, the abundance of cultivation resources, the number of spiritual veins, and the prosperity of the arts of immortality, Taizhou basically crushed Zhangzhou. It can even be said that compared with Taizhou, Zhangzhou is simply a barren land. This can also be seen from the high-level monks on both sides. The only Jindan cultivator in Sangzhou is the son of the 3rd elder of Qianyuan Jianzong. In Taizhou, there were only 3 Yuanying cultivators, and all of them belonged to the Jiang family. As for the low-level monks, the gap between the 2 states is even more astonishing. Even a foundation-building cultivator who has not practiced bodybuilding exercises has a physical strength that is far from what a cultivator in the Qi cultivation stage can match. With the blood crystal into Chen Daoxuan's body, his skin was flushed like a boiled prawn, and in addition, the temperature of his flesh was rising sharply. If a mortal approached him at this moment, I am afraid that he would be directly scalded to death by the high temperature emanating from his body. Despite this, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness was still clear. Since he learned how to use blood crystals from Zhang Yu, this is the first time he has tried to use blood crystals to refine his body. Count carefully. Chen Daoxian has not practiced dragon python swallowing heaven since he entered the foundation building stage. It's not that the level of this exercise is too low, but that Chen Daoxian does not have the appropriate resources to practice this exercise. With the continuous improvement of his cultivation base, Chen Daoxian knew that in fact, it was not the high consumption of ordinary resources but the lack of physical training resources that restricted the high-level cultivators from practicing the body refinement exercises. For low-level monks, it is also possible to refine the body by eating lingmi. But for the foundation establishment cultivator, the low-level spiritual rice is useless, and the output of the high-level spiritual rice is too low, and it is not enough. In addition, the improvement of the cultivator's strength by the cultivation of the body training method is far from the improvement of the strength brought by the improvement of the cultivation base. Therefore, after successful foundation building, monks usually give up cultivating body exercises. Chen Daoxian is a typical example. He found that the improvement of his strength by cultivating the body training method was very small, especially after he established the foundation. The level of kendo increased greatly, which made him feel that body training was useless. As a sword cultivator, it is basically impossible for him to be reduced to the level of hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. In terms of defense, the physical defense of a body refiner is far from the defense of a spirit armor. But in the real demon world, Chen Daoxian saw a completely different picture. In the real world of demons, the human race all follow the way of body refinement, although their way of body refinement is far inferior to the way of cultivation in this world. But I have to say that the recovery ability of the body cultivator is really too strong. As long as you reach the cultivation level derived from flesh and blood, you can be reborn from a broken limb. If you achieve the cultivation level of rebirth from a drop of blood, wouldn't it be possible to be immortal? Close the room. Chen Daoxuan's thoughts turned sharply and quickly calmed down. With the rerunning of dragon python swallowing heaven, the temperature of his body gradually decreased. At the same time, with the decrease in the body temperature, Chen Daoxian found that the strength of the body, which had not been improved for a long time, was slowly increasing. And the speed at which his fleshly body became stronger was far faster than when he ate lingmi. This blood crystal is worthy of 100,000 spirit stones, and the effect is many times stronger than that of lingmi. Chen Daoxian secretly said. In the secret room, Chen Daoxuan's robe was thrown aside at will, and his streamlined muscles were hidden under the skin, making his naked upper body look extremely strong. An hour later, the red color on Chen Daoxuan's body completely disappeared, and his body temperature returned to normal. He clenched his fist lightly, and suddenly, a crackling sound like fried beans echoed in the secret room. With just one blood crystal, the physical body is at least 10% stronger. Chen Daoxian looked at the blood crystals piled up in front of him with a shocked expression. At this speed, with up to 10 blood crystals, I can break the shackles of the flesh and reach the realm derived from flesh and blood. Think of this. Chen Daoxuan's face was full of excitement. If it weren't for the hopeless improvement of the physical body, how could Chen Daoxian give up the opportunity to improve the physical cultivation? Even if the physical enhancement cannot bring much strength to the monk, it can at least increase the monk's ability to save his life. However, blood crystals are too precious to be used by ordinary monks. Continue. Chen Daoxian restrained the expression on his face, and cut his own skin with the flying sword again. Inside the secret room, Chen Daoxian used his flying sword to cut through his skin time and time again, and blood crystals melted into his body, and were digested by him running dragon python swallowing heaven. Because Chen Daoxuan's realm is far higher than his qi refining and body refining cultivation. Therefore, there is no bottleneck at all for this improvement at present. Blood crystals are different from spirit rice, and there is no hidden danger of eating too much residual impurities to damage the body. Chen Daoxian found that it seems that as long as his realm can keep up, he can continue to strengthen. Finally, after Chen Daoxian fused the 9th blood crystal, his body ushered in a drastic change. Although this kind of change is not as violent as when Chen Daoxian built his foundation, the shock brought by the reorganization of flesh and blood is no less than the shock brought by the expansion of the Sea of Qi and the transformation of infuriating energy. Maybe Chen Daoxian's realm is too high, or maybe he himself has built a foundation once. This kind of reorganization of flesh and blood, after all, is a near miss. 3 full days. The reorganization of flesh and blood slowly stopped. Chen Daoxian looked at his newly grown palm and muttered. Just amazed for a while. He picked up the left palm that he had cut off again. Looking at his broken left palm, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but wonder, if he waited for his physical cultivation to be higher and split him in half, would there be two himself? But then, he shook his head again. He knows that there is a high probability not, because his soul is still intact. For example, the palm that he cut off now, although it was cut from his left arm, but at the moment it is just a mass of flesh and blood without soul, it is impossible to grow into a human again. Next, Chen Daoxian must put a lot of blood crystals into this flesh and blood to provide it with the energy to condense the flesh, and finally put his soul into this clone. In this way, the flesh and blood avatar is considered a successful sacrifice. The process is generally not difficult. It's just that there is some pain in the process of dividing the soul, but Chen Daoxian is confident that he can hold it back. In the blink of an eye, a month has passed. With the input of 107 blood crystals, the left hand that Chen Daoxian cut off has long since recovered. At this moment, in front of Chen Daoxian, a huge meat ball with a diameter of about 1 meter 5 floated quietly. Looking at the huge meat ball in front of him, Chen Daoxian knew that the time to split his soul had come. Subsequently, he cut his own soul according to the secret method of Forjie. Since he is only in the foundation building stage, his soul is invisible and intangible, but it is reflected in the sea of consciousness, that is, a piece of his sea of consciousness has been cut off. As this sea of consciousness was cut off, the sea of consciousness of Chen Daoxian's deity collapsed directly. The sea of consciousness that was originally 100 kilometers in diameter gradually became 90 kilometers, 80 kilometers, and 70 kilometers, and finally stopped when it reached 60 kilometers. Chapter 235. Chen Daoxian could not pay attention to the changes in the sea of consciousness. All his mind at the moment was attracted by the meat ball with a diameter of 1 meter 5 in front of him. After the blood-colored flesh ball merged into the sea of consciousness fragment, the red light suddenly became more intense. As the red light flickered, the next moment, the blood-colored flesh ball squirmed wildly. Chen Daoxian knew that this was a sign that the clone was about to take shape. He didn't dare to neglect, when all the remaining blood crystals were about to be thrown into the blood-colored flesh ball. With the integration of blood crystals, the speed of the blood-colored flesh creeping even more crazy. Chen Daoxian could clearly perceive that the energy fluctuations emanating from the blood-colored flesh ball in front of him made him faintly startled. Gradually, the crawling blood-colored flesh ball took on a human shape about 7 feet tall. And the face and torso of the humanoid became more and more clear. To the end, Chen Daoxian found that this new body looked exactly like him. This feeling, just amazing. Suspended in mid-air, the naked clone opened his eyes, looked at the deity in white robe, and touched his face subconsciously. His face was full of weird colors. Chen Daoxian didn't know how to describe this feeling of seeing himself, but he could only use the word, wonderful, to describe it. Although this clone is only in the Qi refining period, its physical strength is almost comparable to the original, reaching the realm of flesh and blood. Chen Daoxian felt it carefully, and his face showed joy. After all, Qin Daoxian spent almost 200 blood crystals, or 20 million spirit stones, for this clone. This price is not too big. If it is replaced by a common magic weapon, he can buy a 4th-order middle grade or even stronger magic weapon. But now, he only got a clone comparable to the Qi refining period. From the point of view of the combat power of the clone, Qin Daoxian undoubtedly lost blood. But the potential of the flesh and blood clone is not inferior to the deity, which makes Qin Daoxian feel worth it. How strong his deity potential is, others do not know, but Qin Daoxian himself knows it. Switching to the avatar of a magic weapon, it is impossible to keep up with his progress. Only the flesh and blood avatar that is in the same blood as him can keep up with the speed of the deity's progress. Qin Daoxian was in a good mood after the success of the avatar sacrifice. Open the door of the cave. Only then did Qin Daoxian really visit the first immortal city in Taizhou, the immortal city of Yongye. Compared with the immortal city in Sangzhou, the architectural style of Yongye Xiancheng is more inclined to black and dark colors. This color tone is also more in line with the solemn and calm cultivation atmosphere of Taizhou. On busy streets, Qin Daoxian wandered around casually, his eyes looking at the shops on both sides from time to time, trying to find some places worth learning from Guanhai Xiancheng. But after shopping for a whole day, Qin Daoxian found that it was impossible for Guanhai Xiancheng to develop to its current scale according to the model of Evernight Xiancheng. From Qin Daoxian's eyes. The reason why the immortal city of the eternal night is so prosperous is that it relies entirely on the entire land of Taizhou to support this immortal city. Although the size of the monks in the Evernight immortal city is not comparable to that of the Yuanshan immortal city through Qin Daoxian's pathway, its wealth far exceeds that of the Yuanshan immortal city. Although Yuanshan immortal city is also very prosperous, the various cultivation supplies it sells are not comparable to Yongye immortal city. In Eternal Night Immortal City, Qin Daoxian was able to buy a foundation pill that could only be bought at the Guang'an Prefecture Xiancheng auction house in a random elixir shop on the street. This surprised Qin very much. Although the foundation establishment pill is not a great elixir, let alone the immortal clan, it is not a precious elixir even for a newly rising family such as the Qin family on Shuanghu Island. But in the entire Sangzhou medicine pill market, it is rare to see any medicine pill shop that sells it in the store. This means that in Taizhou, the foundation pill is not a precious resource at all, and it is in a situation of oversupply. Looking at the leopard, Taizhou's cultivation resources are much richer than Sangzhou. See this. Although Qin Daoxian was very envious, he knew that Taizhou and Sangzhou were in a different situation. This was the Jiang family's territory. True monarch Yuanshan, dignified true monarch Yuanying, were all forced by the Jiang family out of Taizhou. This shows that the Jiang family's style is domineering. The Qin family wanted to extend their tentacles to Taizhou, which was simply courting death. A vast island. Ginger family land. Inside a deep palace. 3 figures with similar faces sat high on the throne of the palace. In front of the 3 people, a shadow stood out of thin air. What do you guys think about your proposal? Black Shadow's tone was indifferent and nonchalant. You want our Jiang family to betray Qianyuan sword sect? The Jiang family Yuanying Zhenjuan sneered, don't forget, Izumo is now under the offensive of my Wanxinghai, you are not crazy, right? Ancestor Jiang, what are the facts? You know it well, why do you deceive yourself? Heiying said in a flat voice, Qianyuan Jianzong and my Xianqing Dao alliance have fought for more than 400 years, have you won the Izumo kingdom? Not to mention the local territory of my Xianqing Dao alliance. Besides, your Jiang family is now sitting on the crater that is about to erupt, so there is no sense of crisis at all. What do you mean by that? Ancestor Jiang felt a wave in his heart and immediately asked. What do you mean? Don't your Jiang family worry that after the real demon world channel expands again, it will become a new 2-world abyss? Heard. Ancestor Jiang stood up abruptly from the throne. He stared intently at the shadow and said word by word, how did you hear about this news? This will not bother Ancestor Jiang anymore. Heiying smiled and said, I just want to know, how did the Jiang family choose? Do you choose to stand with Qianyuan Jianzong and let your Jiang family become cannon fodder against the invasion of the real demon world, or choose to stand on the side of my Xianqing Dao League and become the new Yuanying family of Izumo? Hear this. Jiang Lao's mood that has not changed for thousands of years jumped like a drum. He knew in his heart that his decision would determine the survival of the Jiang family. If you choose the wrong one, you will be doomed. He stared at the shadow, and the shadow stared at him. A long time. Ancestor Jiang said slowly, this matter is of great importance, and I have to think about it again. Yes, but your Jiang family is running out of time. Remember, once the real demon world channel expands, your Jiang family will be worthless. Say it. The shadow suddenly disappeared in front of the three, as if it had never appeared before. Watch the shadow leave. Old Ancestor Jiang clenched his fist tightly. Eternal Night Immortal City. After a lot of shopping, Chen Daoxian finally stopped. This line. He spent nearly 50 million spirit stones in the various shops in the immortal city of Evernight, and this amount of spirit stones could buy 5 Zifu pills. Plus the blood crystals that were purchased for 20 million spirit stones before. On this trip to Taizhou, he spent a total of 70 million spirit stones. Before coming to Taizhou, he brought 340 million spirit stones from the Chen family, and after removing 70 million spirit stones, there were 270 million spirit stones left. Such a huge sum of spiritual stones, even for the great clan in Sangzhou, is a considerable sum. But to today's Chen family, it's really not that scary. The Chen family's magic weapon factory and medicine pill factory have formed a certain industrial scale, and the profits brought to the Chen family every year are in the hundreds of millions. Coupled with the similar traditional income of the Chen family and other cultivators. Today's Chen family, simply described as rich and powerful, is still not enough. Now the headache for the entire Chen family is not the issue of making money, but the issue of spending money. In other words, the Chen family has earned too many spiritual stones, and they don't know how to spend them. If it were replaced by another family, they would definitely choose to store these spiritual stones piled up into mountains and keep them in the family library. But Chen Daoxian is different. Chen Daoxian was unfamiliar with his life, and secondly, he was not sure whether there were stronger monks behind the 2 monks in Zifu. It is not the act of a wise man to act rashly. Chen Daoxian has been in the practice world for so long, and he knows that stability is the first rule of survival. The reason why Shenjuezhen was planted was that he was not stable enough. Although Shenjuezhen's life-saving ability is first-rate, his ability to cause trouble is unmatched in the entire Wangxinghai. Tidy up. Chen Daoxian flew out from the isolated island, and flew towards Zhangzhou with the escape light. Half a month later, Chen Daoxian finally returned to Shuanghu Island safe and sound. Looking at the familiar Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Dantian gas is domestic. A white lotus of good fortune floats quietly, and on the lotus of white good fortune sits a villain exactly like Chen Daoxian. This villain is not Chen Daoxian's nascent soul, but his flesh and blood clone. Similar to the avatar of the natal instrument, the flesh and blood avatar that is sacrificed with the deity can also be taken back into the sea of Dantian energy. This is also the meaning of the word, for the robbery, in the secret method of, for the robbery. At a critical moment, this flesh and blood clone can really block the catastrophe for the deity. Chapter 236. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxian's Lingfu courtyard. A white figure sat on the Wenyu futon, and beside the white figure, a figure wearing a black Taoist robe sat next to it. This black figure is the flesh and blood avatar of Chen Daoxian. Just as the deity opened his eyes, the black avatar opened his eyes at the same time. Chen Daoxian glanced at his avatar, and said with a satisfied look on his face, I didn't expect that it would be so easy to upgrade the avatar to the foundation establishment stage. As he said that, he felt even more satisfied when the deity was promoted to the 4th floor of the foundation building. A mere 3 months. Not only did he restore the deity's sea of consciousness to a radius of 100 miles, but he also raised his cultivation base by 1 level and reached the 4th level of foundation building. Speaking of which, it was an unexpected surprise. Chen Daoxian has not practiced well for a few days since the corpse tied in Sangzhou was pacified. Been running around all the time. This time, taking advantage of the restoration of the sea of knowledge of the deity, advancing the cultivation base to the 1st floor is indeed a surprise. However, for today's Chen Daoxian, whether it is the 3rd floor of the foundation building or the 4th floor of the foundation building, it has little impact on his strength. Because he has already reached the limit state real yuan mentioned in the Qianyuan Sword Classic. Even if he raised his cultivation base to the 9th floor of the foundation building, the total amount of real energy in the Dantian Qi Sea would only increase, and the total amount of real energy had the support of the White Lotus Fortune, and Chen Daoxian was not lacking at all. For the current Chen Daoxian, he wants to improve his strength. Only by raising the cultivation base to the Purple Palace period, or breaking through the space sword intent to the visible realm, or obtaining a stronger magic weapon. As for raising 1 or 2 levels of cultivation, to him, it doesn't make much sense. Of course, although it is of little significance for the improvement of strength, the promotion from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment proves that he is 1 step closer to the Zifu period, which is a good thing for any cultivator. In fact, what surprised Chen Daoxian even more than the improvement of his cultivation was the recovery of the sea of knowledge of the deity. It may be a little inaccurate to use the word recovery. To be precise, it should be the re-expansion of the sea of knowledge. More than 3 months ago, Chen Daoxian cut a part of the sea of knowledge when he sacrificed his flesh and blood in the immortal city of Yongla, causing the sea of knowledge of the deity to collapse to a radius of 60 kilometers. This damage is not too big. It stands to reason that unless Chen Daoxian's cultivation base is raised to the Zifu stage in the future, it will never be possible to expand the Sea of Consciousness. But because he has the Sea of Divine Light, a spiritual practice method. Under his practice day and night, the Sea of Consciousness finally recovered to a radius of 100 miles. However, after the Sea of Consciousness recovered, the speed at which he expanded the Sea of Divine Light suddenly slowed down a bit. For this question, Chen Daoxian is also mentally prepared. If the expansion of the Sea of Knowledge is easy, wouldn't he be comparable to the divine consciousness of Jin Dan or even the Yuaning cultivator in the foundation building stage? Obviously, this is impossible. The original Shinju, a real person, plundered countless elixir to restore spiritual consciousness. When he was in the Jin Dan stage, his spiritual consciousness was slightly stronger than that of the Yuaning cultivator. Chen Daoxian cultivated at the foundation building stage, and his spiritual consciousness was comparable to that of a cultivator of Zifu, which was already a blessing. It is almost impossible to compare the spiritual consciousness of the foundation building cultivation with the golden alchemy cultivator. You must know that the spiritual consciousness of the Jin Dan cultivator is fully expanded, and it can reach a radius of thousands of miles. I don't know how many times larger than Chen Daoxian's current Sea of Consciousness. Except for the change of the deity. What surprised Chen Daoxian even more was the change in his avatar. This avatar has just been successfully sacrificed, and it only has a chi refining stage, but its body refinement cultivation is much stronger, reaching the realm of flesh and blood. In order to enhance the strengths of the clone, Chen Daoxian did not hesitate to spend a lot of blood crystals, and wanted it to improve his body training to a higher level. Unexpectedly, after 3 months, although the cultivation of the clone has improved a lot, it still failed to break through the shackles of the deity and reach a higher cultivation. But the avatar's chi refining cultivation base has made unexpected progress, reaching the foundation building stage. In this way, the strength of my clone is almost comparable to the deity. He looked at the avatar wearing a black robe, and his expression became more and more satisfied. I just don't know how much worse this avatar is than myself. Having said that, Qin Daoxian shook his head. With the deepening of cultivation, Qin Daoxuan's judgment of the strength of the monk became more and more blurred. In fact, after Qin Daoxian comprehended the sword intent, he discovered that it is extremely unreliable to use the cultivation base to measure the strength of a cultivator. Chapter 237. Less than half a stick of incense. The magic talisman made of a lingyu is completed. As the laser head slowly lifted, Qin Daochu took off the made amulet from the workbench, handed it to Qin Daoxian, and said, "Young patriarch, look." Qin Daoxian took the talisman solemnly and checked it carefully. This talisman is the size of a palm and about half an inch thick. The aura on it is restrained, and at first glance it is a first-order high-grade talisman of high quality. Qin Daochu on the side explained, currently, the talisman lithography machine in the talisman factory can only make magic talismans containing wind blade technique, but as long as we verify the stability of the talisman lithography machine, we can also make magic talismans containing other spells in the future. At that time, our Qin family will truly realize the automatic production of magic symbols. Not only our Qin family cultivators will be able to use extremely low-cost magic symbols, but also greatly enhance the strength of the family cultivators. It can also open up a new source of wealth for the family by selling magic talismans. Speaking of this, Qin Daochu's tone gradually became excited. Have to say, the magic talisman, like the magic weapon, can even improve the strength of the ordinary monk more than the magic weapon. Because ordinary cultivators use magic weapons at higher levels, they have to consider the issue of insufficiency of true qi or true essence. After all, not everyone is a sword cultivator, and the quality of true essence far exceeds that of cultivators of the same rank. For ordinary monks in the qi refining stage or the monks in the foundation building stage, using the same level high-grade amulet or a higher-grade amulet can greatly enhance the monk's strength. There are even many monks who regard high-level magic symbols as their trump cards. For example, a cultivator in the late stage of qi refining, if he masters a second-order spiritual talisman, he can explode a blow comparable to that of a cultivator in the foundation building stage in an instant. In the face of this kind of attack, unless the enemy has a life-saving secret technique or treasure, it is inevitable to die. It can be seen from this. How much a high-level magic talisman can improve a monk's combat power. Even if a cultivator in the qi refining stage does not have a second-order magic talisman, he has a pile of first-rank high-grade magic talismans, which can also crush cultivators of the same rank. Just imagine, someone is still manipulating a magic weapon or preparing to release a spell to attack you, but you pull out a bunch of magic talismans and smash it on someone else's face. The picture is simply unbearable to look at. Besides, the charm factory can also bring great profits to the Qin family. At present, there are only 5 large-scale factories in the Qinjia Shuanghu Island industrial zone. Including this small magic talisman factory, there are barely 6 factories. Among these 6 factories, the only ones that can really create profits for the Qin family are 3 factories of magic weapons and 2 factories of medicinal herbs. Only. Now these 5 factories are already saturated, and it is difficult for the Qin family to rapidly expand the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory in the short term. Because although the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory have solved some of the production steps of the magic weapon and the medicine pill, in the final analysis, they still have to rely on the power of the monks for production. It is difficult for the Qin family to have enough monks from their own family to replenish the factory in a short period of time. In the past, the Qin family had to send young monks to the factory in order to make a quick profit, but now the profits of the Qin family are getting higher and higher every year, and there is no need to squeeze the young Qin family monks. Therefore, the educational plan proposed by Qin Daoxian has been implemented again. According to this education plan, it takes at least 12 years for the Qin family's cultivators to graduate from school. Such a long education time must have greatly delayed the time for the Qin family cultivator to participate in production. In the short term, it does affect the interests of the Qin family. But considering the long-term interests of a family, this approach is inevitable. Every time Qin Daoxian used his spiritual sense to probe the 5 factories in the industrial zone, he could see the numb expressions on the faces of the monks who had entered the factory early to work. In a sense, the first batch of monks who entered the factory with the blessing character were basically hopeless. Even if their spiritual aptitude is acceptable, in this high-intensity, highly repetitive work, their thinking and understanding have long since become rigid. Make no further progress in their path. If nothing else, this group of monks of the blessing generation spend their whole lives, and it is not bad to be able to build a foundation under the accumulation of resources. As for reaching a higher cultivation level, there is no hope. Therefore, Qin Daoxian will never let the later cultivators of the Qin family continue to sacrifice for the family like this batch of cultivators. In other words, the sacrifice of this batch of monks of the blessing generation is to make the later family monks stop making such sacrifices. Even if he had to sacrifice, Qin Daoxian would choose to sacrifice the loose cultivators in Guanhai Xiancheng. This is also the reason why he told Qin Daoyan to turn Guanhai Xiancheng into an industrial fairy city. He wants to build an industrial fairy city. In addition to the huge benefits, there is also the factor that Qin Daoxian does not want to see the family monks continue to be exploited. Inside the talisman factory, Qin Daochu said these words excitedly. However, he saw different expressions on the faces of Qin Fusheng and Qin Daoxian. Like him, Qin Fusheng had an excited look on his face, while Qin Daoxian frowned and fell into contemplation. Seeing the two of them looking at him, Qin Daoxian patted Qin Daochu's shoulder heavily and praised, "Good job. Hey hey." Hearing this compliment, Qin Daochu grinned. Looking at the busy factory, Qin Daoxian turned his head and said, let's go back first." Qin Daochu nodded. "Say it." The 3 of them left the factory together and returned to the Institute of Magical Instruments with the escape light. Back to the original laboratory. Qin Daoxian couldn't help but ask, what is the cost and production capacity of the Lingfu factory now? Young Patriarch, Qin Daochu bowed his hands. This talisman factory can only be regarded as a small factory. As you can see, there are only 20 machines in total. According to the speed at which a machine can produce 8 magic amulets per hour, a maximum of 96 magic symbols can be produced in 12 hours a day. Wait, are you saying that this magic talisman factory doesn't stop all day long? Yeah, why stop? Qin Daochu looked at Qin Daoxian with a strange expression. The magic weapon factory is different from the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory. The magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory are limited by the number of monks in the family and have to stop. After all, monks are human beings and cannot sleep without sleep. Work. But the machines in the magic talisman factory can do it. I arranged 3 shifts of ordinary workers, and each worker only needed to work 4 hours to keep the factory running around the clock. Speaking, Qin Daochu's face was full of pride. Hear this. Qin Daoxian didn't know what to say. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay, you continue." Qin Daochu nodded. Most of the Lingyu we are currently buying comes from Jinan Prefecture, and the price is much lower than the original 50 lingshi in Guang'an Prefecture. For only 40 lingshi, you can buy a piece of high-quality first-order top-grade Lingyu. The price of a spirit talisman made of first-order high-grade spirit jade is about 8,100 spirit stones. For example, our wind blade magic talisman can only be sold for 80 spirit stones. Like some defensive spirit charms, the price is higher, about 100 spirit stones. However, as more and more spirit stones flowed into our Guang'an Prefecture from Jinan Mansion, the price of spirit talismans continued to decrease. Compared with the past, the average price of spirit stones was reduced by about 10 spirit stones. To sum up, the profit of each magic symbol produced by our magic symbol factory is about 30 spirit stones. Hear Chen Daoqi's narration. Chen Daoxian finally had a preliminary estimate of the profitability of this small magic talisman factory. The labor cost of mortals is not considered. A small factory with 20 talisman lithography machines can produce up to 1,920 talismans per day, with a daily profit of 57,600 spiritual stones and an annual profit of more than 21 million. In this way, it is almost comparable to the Chen family's magic tool factory. Chen Fuxing on the side was dumbfounded after hearing these words. How big is this magic factory? Compared with the other 5 factories of the Chen family, it is a small workshop, and there is not even a single monk in the factory, but its profitability is comparable to that of a large magic weapon factory. As for the mass production of magic amulets by the Chen family, will the price of magic amulets be reduced? In theory, it will definitely have an impact, but you must know that the world of immortal cultivation is extremely wide, and the market for magic symbols is also the same. Moreover, the magic talisman is not the same as the magic weapon. It is a consumable that is not easy to store, and due to the constant disputes in the world of immortal cultivation, the market demand for the magic talisman is huge. With the Chen family's production capacity, let alone saturating the market in the Xiu Xianjia, it may not be possible to saturate the Cangzhou market. Seeing Chen Fuxing swallowing unconsciously, Chen Daoxian said with a smile, "It seems that this magic talisman factory will replace the medicine factory and the magic weapon factory and become the biggest source of income for my Chen family." Cough cough, hearing Chen Daoxian's affirmation, Chen Daoqiu became humble instead. "Young patriarch, the test of our Lingfu factory is not over yet. Maybe there are other defects in the Lingfu lithography machine." "Yes, you have learned to be humble now." Chen Daoxian laughed out loud. After laughing for a while, Chen Daoxian put away his smile and said sternly, "In short, the matter of the Lingfu factory will be entrusted to your Magic Weapon Research Institute. In the future, you will allocate a special research force to continue to conquer the Lingfu lithography machine. Technical problem. For example, the types of talisman lithography machines, higher-grade talisman lithography machines, and so on. Also, don't forget what you promised me to automate the production of the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory." With that said, Chen Daoxian gave him a deep look. "Hear this." Chen Daoqi's happy face immediately crossed, and said, "Young patriarch, the success of the talisman lithography machine is mainly due to the puppet technique of the Qianji Temple. If we do our own research, we don't know how much time it will take, but the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory can be automated." Chen Daoqiu shook his head and stopped talking. Chen Daoxian also knew that this was completely clueless. Chapter 238. Quantitative Strength. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian looked up and down the weird magic weapon with great interest. How to quantify it? Could it be that by injecting true essence and divine sense into this magic weapon, it can automatically judge the strength of a monk? Ah! Chen Daoqiu was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Of course not." Chen Daoxian couldn't help laughing. It seemed that he thought too much. This was not an online game from the previous life, and it also showed that the character's combat effectiveness was not enough. "Say it again." "Even if this magic weapon can judge the strength of a monk by the strength of the monk's true essence and spiritual consciousness, it is not accurate. After all, the comprehensive strength of a monk is also affected by realm, magic weapon, secret method, etc. This instrument is called Meteor Black Wall, and the main body is made from the fifth order spiritual or meteorite. Meteorite ink gold." Chen Daoxian looked at Chen Daoqiu with a shocked expression. "How much did you spend on this thing?" Chen Daoqiu stretched out a palm and said embarrassingly, 50 million spirit stones. Chen Daoxian shook his head. No wonder Qianyuan Jianzong only bought it from a big family. Who can buy this kind of thing in an ordinary family? Hearing this, Chen Daochu and Chen Fusheng nodded in agreement. In fact, the same is true for the Linglong Pagoda of the Nine Ruins, an instrument purchased by the Chen family from Qianyuan Jianzong. Qianyuan Jianzong's magical artifact hall often introduces some strange artifacts to the immortal clan of Wangxinghai, some of which are quite useful, such as the Nine Ruins Linglong Pagoda, while others are quite tasteless. But the major families did not dare to refuse. It's not just because you are afraid of the power of Qianyuan Jianzong, but other families in Wanxinghai have purchased these instruments. If you don't buy them, you will easily be surpassed by other families in the long run. For example, the magic weapon of the Linglong Pagoda of the Nine Ruins has greatly helped the training of the children of the major families. The same is true for the meteorite wall in front of him. Who knows if it will help to improve the strength of the family cultivator in the future. Even if there is no help, it can help the family to identify the strength of their own disciples. Compared with sparring, this kind of test is more intuitive and does not hurt the harmony of the monks in the clan. Don't think it's a good thing to have wrestling events within the family. Because this kind of competition is often linked to cultivation resources, once the competition is linked to interests, there will definitely be conflicts in the end. For a family, unity comes first. Therefore, Qin Daoxian rarely heard of any immortal clan engaging in fighting competitions within the family. Since its main body is made of meteorite ink gold, it must be judged by absorbing the monk's attack to judge the strength of the monk. Right. Chen Daochu knew that Chen Daoxuan's weapon refining level was still higher than his, and nodded. Not only that, there is also a small cave inside this magic weapon, which is specially used to absorb the aftermath of the monk's attack. It's still a little inaccurate to measure a monk's strength by the strength of his attack, but it's much better than measuring his cultivation base. Chen Daoxian nodded in agreement, then glanced at Chen Fusheng beside him, and said with a smile, "That's why you called Fusheng here, right?" Hey. Chen Daochu smiled. "How is it? What is Fusheng's test result?" "I haven't tested it yet." Chen Daochu shook his head and said with a smile, "We have just prepared for the test, and you will be here, young patriarch." Hear this. An expression of interest appeared on Chen Daoxuan's face immediately. "That's right, Fusheng, go and test it." After thinking for a while, Chen Daoxian added, "No hurry, let's test step by step. Fusheng, first you don't use any sword tricks or magic weapons, just explode the infuriating attack, then use the sword art with empty hands, and finally go all out." Hearing Chen Daoxuan's order, Chen Fusheng cupped his hands and said, "Yes." Next moment, Chen Fusheng stood in front of this dark black ink wall, ready to wait. "Test here, there will be no problem, right?" Chen Daoxian was a little worried. Although Chen Fusheng has only refined his qi to the 9th level, his true qi has already been polished to a perfect state. The strength of his true qi has already reached the limit state mentioned in the Qianyuan Sword Classic. Going a step further, you can only condense true essence. Under normal circumstances, Chen Fusheng's infuriating eruption, the aftermath can knock down a large cargo ship, and if it is tested here, the entire laboratory will be destroyed. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's question, Chen Daochu frowned and said, "There should be no problem. I asked the people in Qianyuan Jianzong's Dharma artifact hall. This artifact comes with a cave that absorbs the aftermath and can absorb the full blow of Jindan cultivator. In theory, even if the nascent soul cultivator came to test, there would be no big problem." Hearing this explanation, Chen Daoxian stopped talking. Thinking about it, the magic weapon purchased with 50 million spirit stones, if there is no way, wouldn't it be so many spirit stones in vain? Between the two talking, Chen Fusheng ran his infuriating qi, stomped his feet and sunk his shoulders, and slammed his palm towards the ink wall. Boom! The air was torn apart with a loud roar. In the end, Chen Fusheng's jade-like palm slammed heavily on the meteorite wall. I saw that a circle of light lit up from the contact between the palm of Chen Fusheng's right palm and the meteorite wall, and finally filled the entire meteorite wall. In this way, this place has really become a place for retreat and purification. Looking at the meteorite ink wall in front of him, Chen Daoxian nodded to the clone in black robe. I saw that the clone's eyes were like electricity, and the body was like a streamer. Turned around and punched the ink wall on the dojo. Boom! A terrifying roar sounded, but in addition, the aftermath of the attack was all absorbed by the small hole inside the ink wall. Next second, the circles of light on the meteorite ink wall flickered like ripples, and finally, a new value, 11, was displayed on the dark meteorite ink wall. 11. Chen Daoxian nodded. The basic strength of the clone is exactly the same as that of the main body, the real essence in the limit state, the physical power derived from the cultivation of the first flesh and blood. Immediately after, Chen Daoxian took out a flying sword from the storage bag. It was the flying sword that the ancestor of the Yang family gave him, the Rainbow Light Sword. Chen Daoxian has rarely used this flying sword since he was promoted to the third-rank middle-ranking sword. It stands to reason that the Rainbow Light Sword, as a third-tier high-grade flying sword, is indeed stronger than the third-tier middle-grade natal flying sword. But if you count the consumption of the true essence by the flying sword of life, it is generally not as good as the flying sword of life of the third-rank middle grade. How to choose only depends on the monk himself. Chen Daoxian chose to use the flying sword of life, so the rainbow lightsaber was dusted in his storage bag. Now, the rainbow lightsaber finally has a new owner. Then, Chen Daoxian threw it lightly, and the rainbow light sword turned into a streamer and automatically flew into the avatar's hand. The clone wearing a black robe took the rainbow sword and glanced up and down at the blade. Holding the flying sword, he charged straight towards the meteorite wall again. His choice was the same as Chen Daoxian before, and it was also a direct melee attack. Since Chen Daoxian discovered that in melee combat, the realm of Kendo can also increase physical strength, it seems that a new world has opened up. In this way, the improvement of body training is by no means useless. If his body refining cultivation base is the same as his chi refining cultivation base and reaches the limit derived from flesh and blood, then his basic strength can reach 20. After the addition of Kendo realm and magic weapon, his strength can definitely reach a chilling level. Boom! Just thinking about it, a roar sounded again on the meteorite wall. In the next second, a new number appeared on the ink wall. 52. Chen Daoxian's eyes narrowed. After using the third-order high-grade magic weapon, the strength of the clone is indeed slightly stronger than that of the main body. Of course, this difference is nothing at all.